Paul Wheelan, an ex-Marine, was arrested in Moscow last Friday for participating in a, quote, spy mission, says Russia. But his family says he was only visiting the area for a wedding.
The 48-year-old international security executive and former Marine has been held in a prison in Moscow, notorious for its harsh conditions. His family, well, they're demanding answers. Joining us now is David Wheelan. He is Paul Wheelan's twin brother. David, tell us your side of the story here. What's gone on for you and your family? And this story does sound a little difficult to follow at times. I mean, he's in there for a wedding. He takes a group of people on a tour. Suddenly, he's brought up on espionage charges that could leave him in prison for 20 years. Explain a little bit.
It's been a very remarkable week, and it's hard to believe that he's already been in prison or in jail for or detention for almost 10 days. We learned about his detention the way the rest of the world did on Monday morning. I was concerned because over the weekend we knew that he had disappeared or gone missing. So I used the internet to do searches and searched on things like American killed in Moscow, and found that the ministry had announced that it had detained him for espionage. And we knew that he'd gone missing because he missed the wedding, which was the whole point of his visit. And it was the groomsmen who made a report to the U.S. Embassy to say that Paul was missing.
David, any reason for you any rationale in your mind? I mean, for those of us looking at it on the outside, we don't know all the details. We don't know Paul the way you do, his background. What reason would there be for Russia to say he's a spy, we're going to detain him?
I don't know. Honestly, I know what everybody has seen about Paul, and they must think he's one of the more quirky people that could possibly have been picked up by the Russian FSB. But I can't think of anything in particular that would have caused the Russian government to want to detain him, and particularly on espionage charges. It just seems totally unbelievable.
Now, the U.S. ambassador to Russia, John Huntsman, has visited him. You have obviously pleaded, to your congressman for some action. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has come out and said the U.S. may demand immediate return of Paul. Take a listen to what he said.
With respect to Mr. Wheelan, who's being held, we've made clear to the Russians our expectation that we will learn more about the charges, come to understand what it is he's been accused of, and if the detention is not appropriate, we will demand his immediate return.
Does that statement give you some confidence that the U.S. government is looking at this closely and will handle appropriately?
Yes, and I think that Secretary Pompeo's statement reflects really what the reality is. The Russian government hasn't given any details about why Paul was detained. They haven't given any details about what the charges are. The Criminal Act 276 is extraordinarily vague, at least in the English interpretation I read. And so I think a lot of this, we're still very much at sea. Even dealing with him in the consulate, the Russian country has been on holiday for this weekend. So the embassy saw him last week and hopes to see him again this week. But it's still very, very early stages as far as even just helping him to get things like toilet paper and his eyeglasses in jail. I think it's going to be a slow process, and I understand that Secretary Pompeo is both engaged in Paul's difficulty and also aware that there's not a lot of detail yet.
David, as you know, in situations like this, speculation can be rampant. Some on the internet, including the Daily Mail, recently suggesting maybe he wasn't even there for a wedding. Can you address those rumors? Was he there for a wedding? Who was getting married? Just any details you can provide.
He was there for a wedding. That's my understanding. I have no reason to think not. I have spoken with the groomsmen. He is also a former Marine. This sort of news story strips privacy from people, and we are doing our best to protect that groomsman because at the end of the day, I'm not sure that the wedding actually has anything to do with Paul being selected. But I don't also think that will have any impact on us getting him home. And at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to get Paul's freedom and bring him back to his family.
David, anytime an American is unlawfully detained by a foreign government, especially Russia, our hearts go out to you. So we appreciate your time this morning. We'll follow this case very closely.
Thanks for sharing your story.